Hey guys, we're at the Imp and the Ogre. My name's Paul.
This is Ryan.
Today we're going to be talking about the madness at Gardmore Abbey.
Bum, bum, bum. This is another 4th edition adventure. It's designed for, level 6 through 8 will be your starting levels. You probably will gain a couple levels throughout there. Obviously, if you're on the lower end of that, it's harder. If you're on the higher end of that, it's easier. It was originally published in 2011. James Wyatt is the lead designer with, was it Creighton? Broadhurst and Steve Townshend are also credited as helping to develop it as well. And if you wanted to run this yourself these days, you can find the PDF on the DMs Guild website. So, in brief, this adventure is super cool.
Yeah, really neat. You get to play with one of the probably most iconic artifacts of D&D, the Deck of Many Things, which is great.
Yeah, the basic whole premise of this is that you are reassembling a deck of many things. So you have to go around and explore this area and find all the bips and bobs, which is what I kind of like about this, is that the trigger itself can be, doesn't have to be, but most likely should be, the PC's finding one of the cards.
It's assumed that your characters have a card to begin this adventure.
Yeah, I mean, some options are presented, whether you can be hired into it, I guess. Yeah. But that's the most organic way to get the party into this. And, I mean, that's kind of fun in that you have to plan if you want to run this. So if you're starting at level 1, for example, and you're moving through it, you know that at some point you need to throw a card from the Deck of Many Things into your PC's path. And you get to pick which one that is.
Yeah, and let them, your PCs need to know what it is too. I think that's kind of implicit in the adventure, that your PCs get the card and then they know what it is, that it's part of the Deck of Many Things. And then they get set off in this adventure of trying to reassemble everything.
Yeah, I think that there's a lot of that stuff that you should get access to before you start the adventure, though there are some NPCs built into this where they could find out more of this. This adventure is set around Winter Haven, which is also in a location that's used for a lot of the other early level 4th edition adventures. If you remember, we talked previously about Keep on the Shadowfell, which is the free 4th edition adventure that comes with the quick start rules that you can get. That's set in the same location. So theoretically, you could run a few of those published ones and then tie it into this as a continuation of sort of a mini campaign if you wanted to. So what's kind of neat is the game, the adventure itself, sort of tweaks with how you'd expect the Deck of Many Things should work. Right? Normally, when you have the completed deck, you draw cards and crazy things happen. But the way they've tweaked this is if you have parts of it, the cards themselves can manifest effects.
Yep.
Which are super cool. And what I liked about this is you get to randomly distribute the rest of the cards throughout the adventure. So there's some fixed encounters and individuals that have cards. Jump in here if you want to interrupt.
Well, no, I think that's the part of this adventure that I like the most. Is not that, I mean, it is a fairly standard adventure run through. There's really neat things that are a part of it, but like the random distribution of these things, that you could run this adventure for different people many different times and never have the same thing play out, depending on where the cards end up, the choices that your characters make, and choosing whoever their patron is, which we'll get to in a bit.
Yeah.
But I think that aspect of this adventure is really creative and makes it for something really interesting.
Yeah, and there are, I mean, you can buy fancy, like, physical Deck of Many Things, but there are plenty of rules on the interwebs where that gives you tips on how to just convert a random deck of cards into a Deck of Many Things. So if you're doing a random distribution, you can shuffle a deck of cards, and the Jack of Clubs corresponds to this card, and that one ends up going into it. But yeah, it's because the cards can manifest different effects. different cards being in different encounters means that the powers that occur in the encounters are different, so the outcomes can be different.
Yep.
And as we'll talk about shortly, there's a secret foe, if you will. There's a
friend or foe, depending.
Secret collector who's also trying to accumulate the cards, and that individual's identity once again is determined randomly by the cards.
Yep.
So there's tons of cool things that are tied to this, all based on how you set it up. So if you really wanted to have control over this, you could pick which cards are where, and you can choose all of this stuff, and you could design the encounters to include blah and blah and blah. But I think it's way more fun to have that element of randomness.
I agree.
Where you lose a little bit of the control and literally let the cards fall where they end up, right?
As they're drawn.
So, Winterhaven. Yeah, let's dive in. So this once again starts around Winterhaven, which is a small little hamlet, I guess. I mean, it's kind of interesting that there's so many cool things around this tiny little town.
Power begets power.
I guess so. I mean, if you ran Keep on the Shadowfell, your players might have a keep in the neighborhood already, and then they can go check out this abbey. So it's considering how many things crumbled from an ancient empire around this place, it's a bit surprising that it still exists.
Resilient population.
I mean, Winterhaven's fine. It's they don't actually provide you with a lot of information.
They don't. You get some information about Gardmore Abbey itself, and that there's an orc.
Yeah, but I mean, Winterhaven is a NPC location. You don't get a lot.
No, I think they give you a short list of who's there and who's important.
Yeah, some minimal lists of NPCs.
Yeah.
I mean, and if you were going to run this, I would definitely go grab the Keep on the Shadowfell thing, because that's free.
Yeah.
And then they do provide more information on Winterhaven there to help flesh it out. Realistically, though, you could make this any town that you wanted. So if you're running other adventures and your PCs already have sort of a home base,
put it wherever.
You can put it wherever, right? Like, it just needs to be a ruined abbey somewhere in the wild. So it kind of can get dropped into any particular place. It's got everything you need. It's functional. It's not impressive by any means. I wasn't super excited, though there are lots of quests that you can get there. It's kind of quest hubby, if you will.
It is. Lots of them seem just to be like there for the sake of being there, and that lots of them you would almost complete them along the way anyway.
Yeah, they're mostly just motivation to encourage the PCs to do what they're supposed to be.
Go to the place and do the thing.
Yeah. But what's nice about it is it kind of depends, and this sort of depends on who your patron is and which NPCs you interact with, but it does sort of give you a progression of tasks. And that's one thing I kind of thought was kind of clever on how they structured the adventure, because it encourages a logical progression, right? It's very difficult for it's very open world, and we'll talk about that in a second here. But the way they use these quests and the quest goals is it definitely sort of works in layers, right? There's the easy access quests to do your scouting and find out the environment, and then you can report on those and you can rest, and then there's you keep going deeper and deeper.
Sure.
It's
like linear, non-linear questing.
It's linear sort of in the sense that there's a progression down deeper into the mountain, if you will. But what you do when you're there is more free form.
Yeah.
Right? Like you're exploring an area, and you have to do the outer levels to get to the next level, right? Yeah. All adventures to a certain extent are railroady to begin with, right? You have a goal, you need to get there. How you get there, the players actually do have a fair bit of flexibility in. But if your players need motivation, which lots of players need guidance,
there's lots of motivation that goes to the place.
There's lots of fetch quests and go check this out and go explore this. So there's a lot of guidance that'll lead the players where they need to be, quote unquote, need to be, right? So it doesn't rely as much on the players being motivated to do this. There's always a reason for them to be there, and I like that, because it really depends on your party and depends on the group of people you're playing with. But oftentimes, if there's no goal,
well, I think the overarching theme is that they're going to collect the deck of many things. The quests in this will make them do it, even if they choose not to do it.
Well, I mean, I don't know that it explicitly makes that a goal, right? You want to find out more about where this came from, right? And as a consequence of doing that, you will
run into the cards.
You'll run into the cards.
Yeah.
But I don't know that right off the bat that's the necessary goal, is to collect all this stuff. It's an inquiry about the cards, and as you collect more, it tends to pile up, right? You get more and more as you go through, and then that sort of leads to more and more conflicts.
Yep.
But for an adventure, there's lots of mini quests. I was a bit surprised. I mean, they're not quality. Right? You're not
it's almost like it's one of those things where you go to town and you collect 10 quests and you're trying to finish them all before coming back to town to turn them in to get max XP.
Exactly. You got to go, grind some wolves or whatever. But what I did like about them, while they're kind of boring from a thematic standpoint, they kind of make sense depending on who's giving them to you, right? We'll talk about the patrons here in a second, but the local rulers gives you quests that are about eliminating threats.
Yeah.
Right? He doesn't care about what's on the lower levels because he doesn't know about the lower levels. He's concerned about the orcs because the orcs are a threat, immediate threat. So it makes sense, right? I mean, as much as they're not super exciting quests, the quests and the quest progression make sense thematically.
Yes.
And there's monetary rewards, and players like money. So it's a win-win all around. And if you've been adventuring in the area, it definitely promotes interactions between some of the NPCs, makes it seem more plausible.
World building.
Yes, it does a really good job of world building. That's a good point.
Making you feel like you're part of Gardmore Abbey and
Winterhaven, the community.
Yeah. You're doing some good. Should we talk about patrons? Yeah. So there's 3 patrons that you can, I guess, choose to do quests for. I mean, you can do things for all of them. The first being the commander of Winterhaven, Lord Pedrig, and his main goal is to get rid of orcs in the area. He
initially sends you to scout the abbey, and then it leads to eliminating orcs in the area, and it builds. I mean, that's one thing I like, is there's a quest progression, and it builds and it builds and it builds. And what I actually really liked about this is the capstone quest for this quest chain, I guess is what it is. It's a defend the location style quest, and I always like those. For whatever reason, I think D&D does those types of assault and defend style scenarios quite well. So, as you know, I don't want to go through all the bits and bobs of this, but basically, as you progress, you end up clearing out this watchtower, and then guards from the town get set up there to sort of keep an eye on things as a defensive position, and then it gets assaulted by the orcs, and I think there's an ogre or maybe a giant or something like that. That's
something
part
big,
of it. So it's fun. There's waves that that you got to help defend, and all of that type of stuff. So it's kind of an intense, fun style little.
It's neat too, because I think that solves maybe what happened when we left question. It wasn't just you cleared it and then it was all of a sudden populated by the good guys, phase change, and there's all the guards around and it's all happy and good. You took something from someone that wanted it and they wanted it back, so you have to keep it.
Yeah, I did, and that's sort of a theme throughout this adventure, is there's lots of actions that the PCs perform that result in changes, right? And I think, you correct me if I'm wrong here, but I think after you succeed in defending the watchtower, any remaining orcs from the encampment are just like, oh, I guess we can't live here anymore, and they leave, right? So
yeah, I think that sounds about right. Yeah,
I believe that's the case. So, as you go through the area, you can have recurring random encounters with the enemies there. Because there's as we'll talk about, there's a huge encampment of orcs. Like the intention is not so much that the PCs are going to go and murder, thriving community of orcs.
Yeah.
That gets into sort of moralistic question about baby orcs and all of that type of stuff. How bloodthirsty are people. But there's a lot of them, and I kind of like the idea that things change, and the idea is that the players are going to come, they're going to accomplish things, and they're going to leave.
Yep.
Which I normally dislike from an adventure standpoint. Like I never particularly like it when the expectation is you go clear out half of a dungeon, then you leave, and then you come back and clear the air. But the adventure itself is designed that way, and the consequences of them doing things are built into it. Defenses are reinforced, things get tougher. To do the same thing twice in the same way becomes more difficult. So there's a believability to it that I liked. Like the whole adventure is designed about go in, accomplish something, leave, deal with the consequences.
And there's also, I guess before talking about the other patrons, in this adventure there's a group of rival adventurers as well.
Yeah. We'll get to that. But we can talk about them now, sure.
Well, just meaning that like if you chose not to go and do Lord Pedrick's thing, that
somebody else
you could go do something, someone else to go and do it. So there's still this progression of time that's going on, that things aren't just sitting there waiting for you to go and do them.
Yes.
Which is, I think, a problem in some RPG type things, that just the whole world's in stasis until you show up, and then time continues
until you open the door.
Yeah,
and they're like, how did? Oh no!
It's they're all actors behind the veil, and you go somewhere you're not supposed to, and everyone's like, The next patron is Sir Oakley,
and he's also in Winterhaven. He's just in the inn. Like he's kind of hard to miss unless you are trying to miss him. And he is a human paladin.
Yes.
That is, I believe his goal is to restore the Abbey. I think he's got some sort of ties to it, to the Order maybe. Like he wasn't there. Like it's been destroyed for long enough that it wasn't him directly. But I think it's sort of his final goal in life type of thing is to restore the Abbey. He's an older paladin, right? He's a graybeard. I think this is sort of his...
Yeah, I can't remember exactly the whole narrative behind him, but in the Abbey there was an evil, and the champion of the temple went down into the depths to try and cleanse it and never came out, and that ends up being part of his story, sort of.
Oh, yeah, part of it, there's a restoration that requires, there's some fetch quests associated with it, basically.
Yeah.
But the whole narrative, I think, if I'm remembering it correctly, was, this was this order of paladins was defending the area. They got attacked by an orc horde. They were going to be overrun. So the leader decided to use the Deck of Many Things, which, they had been basically guarding as this is an evil of chaos that should not be on the world. And he's like, last ditch attempt, let's do something about it. And he pulled a bad card, which then summoned like a bunch of demons or devils or something like that, which then attacked from inside, and the orcs attacked from outside, and bad things happened. The end. So that's part of why it fell. And Oakley is mostly looking to help restore it, cleanse it.
And he'll join you as an NPC along.
You can get him as a full-on companion.
Yeah, if you want him.
You can. He will join the party, and you can run him as a DM NPC if you want, or DMPC, I guess, or have one of the players run him. In those types of situations, it's generally kind of easier to have the players run them for battle and have the DM run them as social interactions.
Right.
Because as a DM, you have enough stuff to do already.
Too many things.
But his quest chain is mostly escorting him to the Abbey itself, and then he has some ritual that he uses to purify it. So that involves having to find certain relics, I want to say. So you get sent to different parts and into the catacombs. And then
there's a defend him phase while he's doing the ritual.
Yeah, he's trying to cleanse it. And I can't remember if it's demons or elementals or something like that.
That's kind of a neat encounter, too, where there's a time. I like things where there's time limits on them.
Yeah, there's waves. And what I liked about it is they're... in this particular type of encounter is they want to disrupt the ritual.
Yeah.
So the baddies that are showing up are less about fighting the players
than
they are getting to the paladin that's trying to purify the temple. So it changes the dynamic of the fight because the players need to really it's protect the vital target more so than just like, oh, I'll just fight this guy and we'll kill them all one-on-one. So it's
a good change of pace in combat where, you know, the objective is different and that the thing that you're defending is not going to help you. He's preoccupied.
And what I like about it is that the players know this is happening.
Yeah.
Right? Like, it doesn't just randomly happen once you find all the stuff. So that means the players can prepare and you can let them plan a little bit, and then you can let them put some defenses in place if they suspect that things might go south, which aren't explicit anywhere in there. But it's just something to sort of be aware of, as it could provide the players with a fun kind of planning session. And then the last patron is Barian Velfarin,
the Fey Knight.
Yes, he's an Eladrin, which I don't know if 5th edition has them yet. It's basically a Fey elf. And you meet him in part of the Abbey grounds. There's a overgrown garden known as the Fey Grove, and he's in there. I believe he's looking for his dad. Is what it was. Is his father went missing, centuries ago, and he's been trying to find out what happened to him. I believe that's it. And then part of that is, I think his sister gets trapped, and you got to go rescue his sister. But in the end,
is the Fae supposed to be at the Abbey, or is that a result of the card's power?
No, it's part of it. I think, if I remember correctly, there were some Eladrin that had a garden there,
right?
And it's grown wild.
Okay,
so it was by design, and that's what I believe that's what you find out, is that Barian's dad was one of these gardeners, and then he ended up dying through really cool reasons that we'll talk about. But I don't think that there's like with him, there's not like a big end interaction.
No,
right? You do his quest chain, and he has a card. Like, it's the easiest card you can get. He's just like, oh great, thanks, here, have a card from my deck of many things. I found this on the ground someplace. So those are the 3 patrons you can get. Now, as we mentioned earlier, what's really cool about this is one of these 3 is determined randomly.
Yeah, is a secret collector of the cards. So their motivation is to collect all the cards for themselves, which is awesome.
And you don't find this out until you have all of the other cards, I believe.
Yeah, and then there's a turn on you encounter. Yeah, but it's neat that there's something going on behind the scenes for the DM to kind of scheme along with, right? Like, you don't just play the NPCs as they're written. You get to kind of take over one. And, it ends in like a penultimate encounter, but you could, I guess, sort of scheme things along the way.
Well, the rival adventurers are working for the secret collector. Right, so there's interactions there. We'll talk about the rival adventures. I have it next. We'll talk about that there. Or there that are kind of room for potential interactions, and you can tip things off. The thing is the secret collector isn't really trying to impede the players, right? Like, none of them are evil, quote unquote, right? Like, I wouldn't say any of the secret collectors in and of themselves are bad. They're just maybe a little obsessed with particular goals.
Yeah, and I think like a neat thing about this whole concept is that if maybe your party is more inclined to be bad, that you could quite easily make the other party the good party in this sense, and they're helping the other patrons do their thing, and you're the one trying to collect the cards for the secret collector.
Yeah, I also like that, depending on what card determine, or what cards the secret collector has, they have more than one motivation. Like, each of the patrons has 2 potential motivations. So on top of having the randomness of who the secret collector is, there's a randomness of why they want to collect the cards, right? Like, and then one, I don't remember them all specifically, but like, some of them are more benign in that, like, I want to use the power of the deck of cards to bring peace and stability to the area. Like, that's a Lord Pedrig one.
Because that's how the cards work.
Well, yeah, that's how they work. Sir Oakley wants to destroy them. Like, one of his motivations is like, I need the deck so I can destroy it. Like, that puts the players in kind of an interesting situation because they can be like, that's a good idea. Here you go. Or they can be like, no.
Or be like, yeah, we'll totally destroy this thing for you over there in the
Yeah.
place and take the cards for themselves.
Yeah, so regardless of the motivation, it results in a final conflict. And basically, this is the last thing that should happen in the adventure.
The confrontation.
The final confrontation,
Yeah.
right? Because all of them, whoever, if you're following their quest lines or whatever, they ultimately all get resolved by the time the players need to explore the entire dungeon before they're able to resolve this, which is one of the clever things of the way they structure these sort of fetch quests, is that there's realistically no way that the players could resolve a quest chain without having had at least the option of getting all of the cards.
Right.
Because, things are required from the rooms, if not the individuals that have the other cards. So it's pretty cool. And all of the final fights are all pretty awesome, right? Like, that's what I really did enjoy, the set piece encounters, right? With Pedrig, you fight him in his audience chamber. He's basically, I need your cards. And you're like, no. He's like, guards, get them. And then, like, you all fight. To me, at least, if I was going to, like, cherry pick a secret collector, if I was going to, like, cheat and make this the outcome that I wanted, I would make Pedrig the secret collector, because it results in you killing the leader of Winterhaven, who is widely believed to be a good person. So from a consequences to the world afterwards, having killed, the lawful ruler of a town.
It's also like, if you've used this town before in other adventures, that could be interesting. Like, you'd assume that you were like trusted adventurers in town at some point. Now you've just taken the head off the person who's supposed to be leading it.
Yeah.
Yikes.
Yeah. No, the ramifications for killing Pedrig are pretty huge, which was what makes it kind of the most interesting potential secret collector and outcome to me, at least, right? Like, I just thought that was fun. Oakley, he completes the ritual, and then he's just like, actually, I want your cards as well. Right? And for whatever his reason, for good or bad, I think both of his are pretty benign. But it's actually just a solo fight between him and the party. They got a bajillion hit points. Like, it's pretty. I don't know that it would be.
Not as satisfying.
It's not. It wouldn't be as satisfying. Like, and I think part of that too is, like, he is like the secret collector. I think the party would be most likely to just be like, yeah, that's sure. Here you go. If they're good.
Reasonable.
Well, none of his reasons are bad.
Yeah.
Right. They're not great, but shrug. Right. And if you kill Oakley, like, nothing, there's like no consequence, I would say, to that. I mean, you killed a paladin, so if you were good, if you were a good party.
Alignment.
I mean, alignment doesn't matter anymore in 5th edition, which is a separate issue that I super disagree with. Like, I think that ruins a lot of what made D&D
like,
cosmology.
Yeah, you could
important.
make like some divine intervention thing here too, right? He's just like cleansed a temple of Bahamut, basically. You could, narrate some, you kill him, but do you kill him? Bahamut intervenes on his behalf.
He rises more powerful than before. This is my final form.
Or maybe Tiamat comes and saves him and corrupts him, and then you got a villain for something else.
Oh, yeah, of course. You can always do super cool.
Yeah, just
cool
Deus Ex Machina this. Make it cool. Change everything.
Yeah. I mean, the thing about this adventure in general, I mean, we haven't really gotten to talk to the meat about it yet, is that if the players don't give up the deck of many things, you now have to contend with a group of PCs that have the deck of many things, like a fully completed, functional as an artifact deck of many things.
I think that's totally fine.
I do think it's totally fine, but you just have to be prepared for that situation.
Yeah, but whatever. Like, I think that's great. What's the opportunity how many campaigns are you going to run that like your players actually end up having something that powerful as the deck of many things?
Yeah, and I totally think it's fun and awesome. But I mean, as the players need to understand that drawing a card from the deck of many things could end the campaign.
Absolutely.
Right, like that's the challenge.
Yeah.
And regardless of the outcome, it will completely change the nature of the group dynamic.
And
right?
if I think if I had a party with the deck of many things, every adventure from there on out would have to put them into like a near TPK situation where where everyone would be like, how do we get out of this? And someone's like, pull a card. They're all
Yeah, I mean it's a potential, right? But I don't know. I just think it's one of those things that you got to be prepared for,
Yeah.
and the players themselves need to understand the ramifications of it. And the adventure provides plenty of opportunity for in-game research to figure out what this is and what it can do. I mean, the Deck of Many Things is a very storied artifact, so unless you're in some sort of really random homebrew campaign where you want it to be abnormal, but if you're playing in the default D&D campaign, like almost everybody should be aware of what it is, and there should be plenty of sages that can provide you with detailed
I
information.
guess anyone with arcane knowledge would be able to be like, I think I've heard of this. It's this.
But I think
So
it's
your
famous enough that like reasonably intelligent NPCs
If you have a spellcaster that's 6 level plus, they should know what it is regardless. Yeah.
should have a pretty good idea. And the last fight in the Secret Collector is with Varian, which, whatever. I mean, it was not super exciting. There's a lot of Fae. Like, you kill a lot of,
I guess if you want to have like a neat
Eladrin.
transition into like a Fae campaign, you could segue that into it, right? Like,
I mean, you could definitely anger the Feywild, and set up a rivalry that way. Restitution needs to be paid because you just murdered a bunch of like
the children of the Fae.
Well, you just killed a lot of Eladrin, like who are generally
Go sit trial in front of the court.
exactly. You go to the fairy court, the summer court, or the unseely court, and the court of winter. There's all kinds of cool things that you could transition from in that fight. I didn't think it was any particularly like, it was not exciting, in terms of it's just a lot of baddies, and it's just a big slugfest. So once again, like, unless you build in particular ramifications, there's no inherent issue with killing them. But I definitely think like there should be some sort of
Build something in,
consequence.
yeah. I mean, you shouldn't just be able to kill like the children of the Fae for no.
Well, they're
real
not
reason.
bad people, right? I mean, we kind of forget it.
They're like magnanimous. They're beyond the.
They're not bound by your
Yeah.
mortal morality. They're
Exactly,
above
yeah.
such petty things. I mean, and you could play it up that way. It really depends on how you structure your campaign world. But that's always the fun way for me, is to play the Fae as not really caring about human rules and human laws.
Their age is just a blink
Exactly.
in the sands of time.
They've had longer bowel movements than most human lives, right?
maybe, yeah.
With the time dilation, right? I mean, I'm sure pooping in the Feywild is like a whole, could be.
Yeah, could be.
Could
yeah.
be. It depends on your time dilation, right?
The Fae only poop at home. Like, so they got to go back, and they come back, and like the whole, ages have gone by, and they're like, damn.
Yeah, I didn't think it was in there that long. Anyways, okay, so those are the Secret Collectors. We mentioned it previously, but now's a good time to talk about the rival adventurers.
Yeah. There's another group of adventurers trying to do the same thing as you are, effectively. They're trying to collect the cards as well.
Yeah, they're exploring it. They can collect the cards.
Yeah.
I mean, their motivation can be murky. I have it written down here and I'd forgotten, but they're not always working for the collector.
But there's things like there's a mini quest to like go, I can't remember what it is, go clear out some like non-existent minions at one point. If you decide to go and do that, you show up, they're already there.
Yeah.
They've done it, and they're just kind of like, yo. And you're like, hey. And they're like, okay. And then they're just kind of like, see ya. So it's this non-confrontational thing, and you show up and it's like already done.
Oh, I like the progression of it, right? Because in some of them they're fighting.
Yeah.
And you can just be like, all right, you got this.
Yeah.
See
Hey,
you later.
guys. You can join them. You can work with them. It's
Yeah, so you mean there's situations where you come across them camping after getting into a fight. So if you were going to jump them, the resources have been spent. It's a good time to jump them. So there's a progression of your encounter. I can't remember if there's 4 or 5 of them, but there's a progression of it. And what I like about it is the location of those encounters are random.
Yeah.
Once again, determined by the cards that the rival adventurers have. This should eventually result in conflict at some point, because if you're both trying to collect the cards, unless you're going to rock paper scissors for them with with them, they're not necessarily evil, They're just another rival group of adventurers trying to accomplish what you're trying to accomplish.
And if you're running 2 campaigns, run the exact same, run this adventure for both of them, and then organize the final adventure with them fighting each other.
That would be kind of hilarious, to be honest.
All of a sudden, there's 10 people at the table. No one has a clue what's going on. Narrate them in.
And they have to kill each other.
That'd be amazing.
It would be pretty amazing. If they end up being working for the secret collector, those actually can make some pretty tough fights, right? I mean, 'cause all the individual fights are pretty difficult, but then all suddenly, a group of equivalently leveled adventurers show up, and now you're fighting them and them. Like,
and they should be at the same power level as
they're about the same, I believe, right? So it should be a big deal. Like, if the players don't flat out murder, the rival adventurers or drive them off, will be nice and say that they convince
more
them to do
likely
it.
Murder.
More likely murder. We're all.
This could be a fatal encounter for sure.
If they haven't dealt with them and they are working for the secret collector, they all show up at the same time.
Yeah.
Then it's likely the PCs lose. It doesn't necessarily have to be a TPK though, because once again, the collectors aren't evil.
They just want the cards.
They just want the cards. So defeating the players in these particular encounters don't have to be death.
You could have the commander exile them from the town,
or you get thrown into prison.
Imprison them, or
most likely you'd probably be imprisoned with trial, with the likelihood of being hung. But that's completely up to you. And the other ones might just leave you bleeding on the ground, right? Like Oakley would probably just take your cards and heal you. He's a nice guy. But
thanks for your cards.
Yeah, no, it gives some interesting things, and there's plenty of other places where the players can get eaten and flat out just die. So it's getting to this point alone will be a challenge.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the setup, right? You're going to come across cards. We've talked about the beginning. We've talked about the end.
It's the meat and bones of the whole
adventure.
Let's
talk about the middle. And I like the way this is structured.
Mm-hmm.
I like that, especially at the beginning, it's borderline a hex crawl. Like, there's this huge area, and you can explore the different parts.
Yep.
There's different places of interest that you can go to. I mean, you're directed to check them out by different people.
It's just not all dull stuff either. I thought lots of the stuff was very cool and interesting. The interaction with the Etten, the 2-headed Etten, I thought was really neat. So guards the gate of the. So
I guess just to describe what we have here is basically you have the outer area is 2 places. There's the Fey Wood or whatever it's called. It's the overgrown garden.
Mm-hmm.
Then there's the old town, which has been taken over by the orcs, where the Etten is. And then there's the keep, or the temple, the abbey itself, actually. So then there's the abbey, and then there's the lower levels of the abbey.
And the watchtower.
Yeah, the watchtower is part of the outer wall, and there's also a keep. That's where the orc boss is. So, but this is just sort of our general layout if you're not familiar with it. So basically, the players come up on an old ruined wall surrounding the keep when they get there, and there's the front gate, which is guarded by orcs. So you can fight them, which I actually liked. One of the things, like, every time you fight the orcs at the gate, there's more orcs. They're like, ugh, they just keep bringing more and more. But you don't have to. Like, you can sneak in there, you can hide. You don't, like, it's a whole orc village.
Mm-hmm.
There's 100, 200 orcs there. So the idea that the players are supposed to just be like, run in there, and they'll just die. So you got to be somewhat sneaky. Are you remembering what I'm talking about, though? The 2-headed. Oh yeah, we'll get to the end. The end's awesome. Yeah. He guards the boss orcs keep. But what I liked about the initial structure of this is it really rewards parties that take the time to do some surveying, to do some scouting. This is a high enough level. The wizard can cast fly and invisibility. Just go check things out, because you get so much more information than just like showing up. Right? If you're just like, if you just follow the road, you're just like, oh, okay, there's the front gate, there's orcs, let's go fight. That is the worst way to do this. Like, you can climb the wall, and if you follow the wall long enough, there's a hole in it that leads into the wooded part, and then that's where you meet Barian, right? Yeah. Like, depending on which way the players go, they might not meet Barian until like
the end,
almost the end. right? Like you can do basically almost the entire thing without finding him, but he's got one of the cards, which is sort of, I think that's why they gave him one of the cards to force you to
go talk to him,
interact with him, because otherwise he's kind of completely skippable in a lot of ways. So yeah, I like that there's a bunch of different things that you can do. Depending on your party, you might have them chain pull the entire thing. I mean, if they harass the orcs enough, the orcs will just be like, fine. You get attacked by a party of 50 orc berserkers. You know, like you definitely may play it up to a certain extent here that like if you harass them enough, there's nothing stopping the orcs from just going like and having a retaliatory raid on Winterhaven.
Yeah.
Right? Like you poke the bear enough.
Right.
You know, they're gonna rile them
and they're
up.
only a problem in so much of the sense is that the town thinks they're a problem. I don't like it. Doesn't really. I'm sure they're doing orc stuff, but it's like
doing orc stuff.
Depends what evil is on the side that you are on.
Yeah. So there's a bunch of random places in here. That there's two. Well, actually, there's three, but we'll talk about the other one later. But there's 2 points that I thought were kind of interesting in here. There's the Wizard's Tower and then the Keep. As you want to talk about the Etten, let's talk about the Keep first.
Yeah, the Etten. He's like such a cool idea. He's got 2 heads, and depending on what head is awake during when you come and talk to him, one is like super agreeable, the other one is not so agreeable. When they're both awake at the same time, they're much smarter. I just thought it was like super funny, really neat, a good idea for anything with 2 heads, and that being able to talk to something when one of the heads is asleep and like trick it while the other head is sleeping, and then having the other head wake up mid and realize what's been going on.
Oh yeah, you could have a lot of fun because you could also there's nothing stopping you from having multiple interactions with them. So you could make a deal with one of the Etten while one is sleeping, and then come back later and the other head's awake, and he's just like, "Who are you?" It's like we just talked. He's like, "No, you didn't." Right? Like, definitely.
Like, no, we totally just talked to you. And he's like, "What do you mean? This guy?
We already paid you." It's like, no, you didn't. Right? Like, so you could definitely play up that kind of interaction really interestingly. So the Etten guards the Keep, which is where the boss orc is, and the boss orc, I believe he is he's one of the guys that has cards. I believe he's got one of them. So realistically, you're gonna have to fight him at some point or stealth in there and take it. You can negotiate with him. He's willing to talk. Right? That's one of the neat things is that you're not automatically forced to murder him. You're more likely to murder him than anything else because you can negotiate with him, but usually the results of negotiations are any price that the players would really want to.
Yeah, but I mean, you could sneak in and maybe get into a favorable combat position, or get an audience and be in a way more favorable combat position than
the fact that he's willing to talk first is you don't have to fight the Etten and then just fight and fight and fight. Like you can get to see the chief and then like betray him immediately if you want to.
Excellent.
But there's whenever there's options provided, I'm in favor of that. I like it when the adventure doesn't force you to only treat things in a certain way. Not seeing everything as a nail and the party as a hammer.
Yeah.
Right? So there's multiple ways of dealing with this.
Well, it's one of those things that's like your party should be smart enough that, like you were saying, they should know that they can't run through a camp of orcs to get to the end.
Let's not assume anything.
Yeah.
Right? Like, we've been there. It depends on it depends on the nature of your party. Like this is the type of adventure that definitely rewards more careful parties that are willing to think before they just run into something. If you have a player that is easily bored and just wants to get into a fight all the time, then you may run into some complications. Mostly it'll be fine, but I could see it being frustrating if not everybody's on the same page, because there's opportunities to investigate, opportunities to have dialogue. There's opportunities to talk to almost all of the NPCs that you have to you should murder, right?
I think there's enough like variety in this whole, I mean, this is not just a sit down and do it one time adventure. This is,
I'd say like almost a mini
campaign like you were saying earlier, that hopefully there's enough things that'll like attract, be attractive to different players at your table that they won't feel the need just to rush into immediate danger.
No, there's a lot of approaches that would work, and there's lots of ways that you can handle this. It'd be kind of fun. And one of the other locations I really liked was the Wizard Tower.
Yeah.
There's basically a crazy,
been corrupted by chaos,
undead wizard in there. He was in love with some paladin, and then she like died in the initial assault, so he tried to bring her back to life and kind of succeeded. Brought her back as some crazy undead monstrosity, and he's just bonkers. What I loved about him because he's totally that kind of mad scientist-y vibe that is absolutely willing to have an intelligent, reasonable conversation with you until you're like, all right, cool, we're gonna go. He's like, no,
You have to stay.
you have to stay now.
Like, what do you mean? You're like, well,
I need to experiment on you, right? Like,
yeah, the whole. I mean, you could probably spend a whole hour just talking about this tower in itself, but it's been corrupted by one of the cards. You know, it's bordering on the realm of chaos. There's like a chaos point system that when you get into this, that if you accumulate too many points, your characters start going insane, and all these like crazy things start happening to them.
Oh, isn't that only in the Watchtower, or is it in the?
Is that the Watchtower?
I think
Or is
it's
that
the
Wizard's
Watchtower.
Tower?
I think the Watchtower. The Wizard's Tower is the one that's all icy. Don't get me wrong. The Watchtower is. I think it's the Watchtower. It's where the Beholder is. Regardless, the Far Realm stuff is what we're talking about, right? I think I think it's. Let me just check my notes.
Oh, it does say Watchtower.
Yes, the Watchtower. Right here. Watchtower is awesome. So, so yeah, that's the Watchtower. The Wizard's Tower, it's got a lot of ice theme to it. And then I think because doesn't he have like frozen undead that he releases from their prison and then they fight you and all that type of.
This is vaguely ringing a bell. Maybe I skipped over most part of this.
Yes, you got to read more carefully. Paul does not have an informed opinion on this particular part of the adventure. It's just fun. It's small, right? It's you're sent here to investigate something I can't remember off the top of my head now, so I apparently don't have an informed opinion on this either. But you do get guided to go here to recover some things. So the players have reasons to get stuff here. I think it's part of by default the Eladrin quest. I think there's some information that they're looking for. You might have to go here for Oakley's quest 2 ? Because you have to find some stuff for him. I think also there's an NPC in town that has questions about the Wizard Tower, because there's the Sage whose name escapes me at the moment. But so there's a bunch of reasons to go check this out, other than the fact that like, hey, it's a Wizard Tower. I bet you there's all kinds of cool things in there, right? Like party greed will definitely end up leading a bunch of things.
Just says Wizard Tower out front.
Neon
open
lights,
sign going,
flashing. Yeah, it's well, come on, it's a tower in a town. Wizard. Like, no one else has towers, right? It's some sort of fancy pants individual. So those are the main points of the village. I mean, there's a few other places that you have to go check out for, like you have to recover something for Oakley and fight some undead knights and a few other things like that. But I was just sort of like, it's a fight. You got to go there. You kill some undead. Right? So until you wrap up the Paedrig quest line, if you're doing that, the orcs are here in the town. And every time you try to move through the town, you can have random encounters with them. There's always the gate guard. There's always the chance of fighting unless you bypass it. And it's one of the only ways to get into the, it's called Dragon's Roost. That's what it's called. Into the Abbey proper. And I don't want to skip to Dragon's Roost right now, but it's the players might have to be going through this multiple times, right? And I mentioned previously, once you've completed the Watchtower defend thing,
it's like a Metroid-esque. You need one thing to unlock the next thing.
Well, you can actually bypass all of that part there. There's the secret back stair that Oakley knows about. So if you've interacted with Oakley, you can get into Dragon's Roost first.
Right.
Like he doesn't know exactly where it is. He just knows it exists. Yeah. So you as a party can go find it, and then you like go up a cliff or something like that, up a secret path.
Which also is like makes this adventure dynamic, that if you choose not to work with one of them, you're not going to have information that the other people have.
Exactly. Like, there's no other way to know that. Other than, I mean, I guess if you were super keen and like had good perception checks, and, scoured this random cliff because there might be a secret path. But depending on which approach you take, and you can take all of them. Like they're not mutually exclusive.
Yeah.
Like you can work for all of the patrons at the same time. And double dip, I guess, because some of them send you to the same place. So that's the outer town area. The other part of the outer area is the Fey Grove, which is where the Watchtower is.
Okay.
So that's where Barian is. Like you can meet him there. It's kind of just like a Fey fiesta, more than anything else. Like there's a bunch of encounters in there that don't really matter? Question mark. Like you fight owl bears because like they're in like,
cool minis.
They're cool minis. They're fun to fight. People kind of know what an owl bear is. There's giant spiders.
Yeah.
There's displacer beasts. Woo. Which are fun. Like I like displacer beasts. They teleport around. Like it's just fun to fight them. So there's lots of interesting monsters, but things like this always kind of bother me to a certain extent. Where you're just
like the stuff for the sake of having stuff.
It's like we have everything there. It's not thematically cohesive. It's like it's Fae. Let's flip to the Fae section of the Dungeon Master's Guide.
Pick out a couple things.
All the level appropriate, or the Monsters Manual, all the level appropriate Fae, and then you get to fight all of them, and then it feels super Fae-y. Yeah, I feel some of these are fluff fights that maybe you don't really need in there. I mean, that's another thing that kind of bugs me when you're using just a standard XP driven progression.
Right, yeah.
Those types of adventures tend to just have filler fights.
Yeah.
Which, when you have limited table time, there's probably some things you could cut because they don't really add anything to it. And I'm always sort of in favor of cutting things that you don't need, especially when they don't really make sense, right? There's no narrative reason for them to be there. The one encounter that I did enjoy is there's nymphs, and they want you to RP. They want you to role play the whole encounter, so you're not supposed to fight them. You're supposed to chit chat with them.
The nymphs.
But like the advice given in the adventure is to have people like actually tell giant stories. Like I was reading, I'm like, man, if you actually did this,
what did they the specific question that they ask you? Do you remember what that is? They want you to tell them something.
But they want you to entertain, like tell you, like,
entertain them.
So you got to tell them
like
like actual stories and things like that. I'm reading this, I'm like, if you literally make, and it specifically says, have your players actually tell the stories, not just sort of say, okay, I tell them a story and make a charisma roll. Like,
and it's like every party member needs to do it too.
Every party member. I can't remember if there's a boon or bane or something like that happens if you screw up.
You get Ioun's favor.
Oh, right. You get a bonus.
You drink from the well.
That might not be tied to the nymphs. I can't remember specifically. But yeah, there's some stacking bonuses that you get in there. But like literally, if you did it, it seems like it expects you to have like an hour of just like talking.
And then we went to the goblin camp, and I was the only one left alive, and we murdered their children.
Yeah. Like, so, a good idea in theory, but I don't know. Like in practice,
like maybe having your players just like recall things that they did. Don't tell the story, but it's like how much are they actually paying attention to all the things that you're doing along the way?
Yeah, I mean, it could potentially be a fun opportunity to recount. The player's version of the last adventure that they did or something like that. But I don't know that I'd have every single party member do it. I mean, this is a good opportunity if you have a bard, because if you have a type of player that like really likes being a bard and like wants to say the lay of the adventuring party. Like,
well, I've been writing this ballad.
Yes. me. Yeah. And then they move on. Okay, so the other part. Oh man. You could theoretically have a ton of fun with that for sure. So the other really cool part that's sort of tied to the Fae Grove is the Watchtower, which I think is part of the Outer Curtain Wall, but regardless. So you get sent here as part of Barian's quest. You also get sent here as part of Pedric's quest. And this is the thing that's been touched by the Far Realm, which once again, I'm not sure if they've built that into 5th edition yet, but it's,
it's the coolest part of this whole.
It's cool in and of itself, right? The tower is blocked, like you can't get in, and I can't remember how you're supposed to get in now, which is awful. But
yeah, there's no door.
The door is sealed, and I can't remember specifically how you get in, which makes me feel kind of bad. It's been there's a delay between reading this and actually sitting down to record this, so I apologize for that. So you can get in. It's tricky. It's not inherently obvious how to get into it, but you have to get into it.
Playing using one of the cards.
Yes, I think you need. I think you use a card to get in. That's it. Yeah. There you go.
Yeah.
But what I loved about it is that if they try to attack it, it bleeds black puddings.
Yeah, I mean that was like number one. Black pudding blood is neat.
Yes, bleeds black pudding. So yes, you need. That's what it was. You need to use one of your cards to create a portal inside so you can get into it. Which isn't. It'd be really hard to figure out how to do that. So you might want to like tip it. If the player is holding it, you should be able to. You should make hints like that person's moving closer. You gotta telegraph it a little bit more. Not so much that they don't at least try to attack it at least once, because you kind of want it to bleed the black puddings, because it's awesome. It's one of those things that, like, as a DM, if we got to the point and the players are like, "Oh, just use a card," and you miss out on the black puddings, it'd be like, "Oh, no, you sure you don't want to attack it?"
The card doesn't work the first time. It looks very fragile at the wall. Yeah, I thought that was super cool. The whole watchtower has this theme of being like yuck. It's just like a gross kind of
organic
thing. It's like living. Gets the sense that it's living. There's that chaos point system that I mentioned earlier.
You can mutate, you
can lose your grip on reality and become these mutants.
You get like tentacles growing off of you, and
there's certain. I think in the last fight where you run into a beholder, eventually you get to the top of this watchtower, you run into a beholder. There's like area of effect, like chaos.
Well, because you got to go into the far realm. So you actually need to, like, it's been tied. I can't remember there's something to do with the cards and blah 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 blah. But you got to go into the far realm to deal with this beholder who's also trapped there. Yeah. Who just wants to get out. Yeah. Like, he's just like, I'd like to get out. Like, right? Like, so
he's super smart. Like, this goes to another conversation I think we've had with beholders that, like, maybe this couldn't be a combat encounter. Yeah. I think
it's highly likely that it is, because he has like 3 of the cards or something like that. And I don't know if you could get him out, because he's part of the corruption of the far realm. Because once again, like, this is where those issues you're going to run into with sort of edition problems, not addition problems, in that they've kind of changed in 5th edition the nature of beholders, right? If anyone's read Volos, like, beholders are born from, like, the nightmares of other beholders.
So cool.
So they dream themselves something that's strong enough to kill them, and then they just, like, damn it, kill the monster that, like, dreamed them up. Like, which I believe in 4th edition, and I could be wrong here, I believe they're tied to the far realm. Like, I'm not sure if the far realm really exists in the same way in 5th edition, if at all, as it did in 4th edition. So there you'd run into some if your players are, like, super keen on that type of lore stuff, it'd be a little wonky. But beholders are awesome. Fights with beholders are always pretty potentially ruinous. Like, this is one of those situations where you're kind of, like, forced to fight a beholder and expected to defeat a beholder, and as a DM I'm like, you probably shouldn't, because beholders are supposed to be super smart, though this one's trapped, so maybe I guess thematically it kind of makes sense, but
maybe a bit corrupted, I guess you could.
You can play it however you want. Of all the NPCs that you interact with, this one is the most likely to be resolved without direct murdering, but probably not, again, because beholders
I guess you could make, like, an HP threshold where, you get him to a certain amount and he asks you, like, why are you here?
I don't know. He's willing to talk, right? Whenever you're willing to talk, things can happen. But on the other hand, like, are you really going to release a beholder into the world if you have the opportunity to put him down? I guess some players, sure. But, like, this is one of those situations where you could have Oakley with you, and Oakley's just going to be like, no.
Yeah, I can't do that, guys.
We gotta kill this thing, right? So it's a really thematically cool place. And realistically, you could just crop that out and stick it wherever you wanted to have some sort of weird tower thing.
Definitely.
Right. So back to the Dragon's Roost. This is the actual Abbey top proper, right? So this is where Oakley wants to get to. So you're going to get here eventually regardless. I literally just wrote Monster Fiesta and then a list of monsters that you fight, clearing this place out. And to be honest, it's kind of ridiculous.
It's not even in my notes.
Clearing out the Dragon's Roost, which is just a couple of rooms, you will fight a rust monster, which is awesome, gargoyles, a rage drake, a bullet, or bullet if you want to pronounce it that way, carrion crawlers, harpies, and angels.
Whoa.
Like it's just a nonstop fight of random stuff, and this is kind of the same problem I had with the Fey Grove in that
Stuff for the sake of being stuff.
Stuff for the sake of being stuff. Why are they there? Because
I guess I'm just not a big fan of stuff that doesn't progress plot, really, right? And it's just like you show up in a room and there's just things to fight.
yeah,
And combat takes a long time. Like, I mean, that would like this whole, just explaining that would be like a whole sit down session.
yeah.
It's too much time.
Well, I mean, some of it just bugs me too. Is like carrion crawlers need to have carrion. Where are all the dead bodies? Well, I
Maybe
guess they don't need
came
to.
from
I mean,
the
like,
undead in the
or
basement.
why aren't they fighting each other? You know, like
they're
there's
all
always
friendly with one another.
there's always this sort of like, oh yeah, well they don't interact with each other because of mutual monster respect. I don't know.
The unsung code of the, they all,
yeah,
the monsters go to the tavern. They're like, where am I assigned to today, boss?
Yeah,
they're like,
so-
oh, you're going to the Dragon's Roost with the gargoyles. And they're like, I hate the gargoyles.
Yeah, they're in the Wandering Monster Union. Like they got to punch in and punch out. I mean, some of these are just fun things to fight. Like rust monsters will ruin your day, man. They can just destroy your armor and weapons, right? Like, and you're just like, oh, okay, that sucks.
You could pick a couple of these things and make it a more memorable encounter, I guess, as opposed to just fighting a ton of stuff.
I would try to make things more thematic. Boobadoo.
Boop-a-doo.
You want to check what that is?
Windows update.
Please ignore the Windows updates. So continuing on. Sorry, I was just afraid that like something went wrong with the stuff. I would like.
This whole next section is dungeon crawly.
Yeah, but at least the lower sections fit more thematically, right? This upper one is just like a bunch of things just decided to layer in different rooms right next to each other.
Big
so
eye
like,
roll.
exactly, big eye roll. Like literally, it would, I don't know, pick something big. Like have one big tough fight in here.
That came to live.
It's just layering in there. It has to be big and scary enough that the orcs haven't taken over this. Right, there's nothing living there right now that a village of orcs couldn't have taken
True.
out. Right,
Big and scary enough that the things in the basement won't come up and the things up top won't go down.
yeah. So I don't know. I don't want to say dragon because, as we'll see,
There's a
already a
dragon.
dragon. But something or
Or like a mated pair of something, you know.
yeah, there could be a bunch of things
I don't know,
roosting,
yeah.
or even just like you could just stick with things like the harpies and you just make like a bunch
Harpy
of
roost.
harpy nest, right?
Yeah.
Or wyverns or wyverns or manticores or you put a couple giants in there if you really wanted to, right? I would put fewer things that would fit thematically, and then and the issue comes down to is I think there's a design decision here where people don't like empty rooms.
Yeah.
So if they draw a map that has a bunch of rooms, then there needs to be something in every room, which realistically doesn't make any sense. Like if you're exploring a dungeon, most of the stuff should just have nothing in it.
And I guess if you put like something that was powerful here that is beyond the control of the orcs to get rid of, you could change things, and like now you're negotiating with the war chief of the orcs. They've been trying to get something from these things that are in here.
Yeah.
That's why they're there.
Yeah.
So there'd be like another way to defeat something or get something or move things on aside from just murder.
Yeah. I mean, you could definitely include some negotiation.
Yeah.
So I think there's room for improvements on that. So that's the roost. It's nothing super exciting. And then from here, there's the lower levels.
The catacombs.
So there's basically two floors beneath it. There's the catacombs, and then below that are the vaults, which the vaults are. I mean,
Yeah.
basically, the idea here is this is built on the ruins of an old temple, and
Huzzah.
like, as things tend to be.
Yeah.
Civilizations built on civilizations built on civilizations. So you go from the Dragon's Roost, you get sent to the catacombs and the vaults on your fetch quests because
yeah.
reasons.
There's a bunch of undead encounters.
Well, the
down here.
catacombs is, as I think I wrote, this is the undead level,
Yeah.
right? So, so there's a bunch of there's ghasts and skeletons and wraiths and mummies, rot grubs. I like rot grubs. I'm a big fan of swarms, especially the gross kind that like burrow into your skin.
Bleh.
Like it's thematically.
The only thing I noticed,
cool.
like especially about the basement, is that there's almost like an area for every single god. I was like, this is a temple built for one thing, yet in the basement of the temple, they worship every single god?
I mean, there's some reason given for that in here, and I'm like, whatever. You can have it, designer. You wanted to do it. I did think there was lots of cool environmental things in the catacombs. So like there was, you could drink from a fountain and it would give you a necrotic resistance, which definitely helps down here. You can put bones to rest.
Yeah, there's a mural that you could repair by doing different tasks. I thought that was pretty neat.
Yeah, so it was cool that you could gain bonuses for like helping to clean things up and put bones to rest, and you get penalties for looting. Right, so there you'd be like, hey, cool, look at this, a dead hero died is buried here, let's see if they have anything, and you would get penalties. In here there's a necromancer because
Well, you can't leave because there's orcs upstairs.
well there's maybe something scarier than orcs now, right, that found, came in there after you came in, whatever. There's a human in there.
How does he get his food?
I don't know. These are cleric. You probably just cast them, right? Dungeon ecology doesn't make any sense, right? Should just smell horrible because where's all the poo go, right? He's just pooping in a corner.
Carrion grubs.
There you go. There's the rot grubs, and the carrion crawlers are just fecal removal. So the boss fight I thought was actually super tough here, right? Because there's a lot of stuff going on. He's got a basilisk, which is also some bad saves. Game over party.
Yeah.
There's vampires because why not? All right, and he's got a bunch of cards, so there's card effects which can totally swing the nature of it.
And the cards in this adventure are, they've got powers, but when they're played, they're not the full force of what you would expect to deck many things because they're not assembled. There's some environmental ones, there's some personal ones. They do damage
or move people around. It's added stuff to mess with the normal flow of combat. Now, one thing I did think was interesting is there's this poison potion stuff that this guy's been researching down here, and it's called Void Hollow. And what I love about it is that, like, if the PCs just ignore it, kind of, it's fine. But if they start to mess with it, they get the Abyssal Plague, which is awesome. So you're actually penalized for being curious. And I just have a personal love of any type of game design feature that punishes players for being curious or incautious.
Yeah, well, that's it. It's just like not everything is friendly.
and that's something that I think it's definitely been pulled out of the adventures over the editions. Is earlier adventures used to be super unforgiving. Be like, oh, it looks delicious. I take a bite of the cake. Okay, roll a dice. I rolled this. Okay, you die. Game over. Like they removed a lot of save or die effects, which, yeah, fair enough. Just dying for trying things for no reason, I guess, is unfair. I mean, players used to be disposable. Used to be like, oh, okay, and then you just had another one.
Yeah.
So it was less of an issue now, but I think
the narrative-driven people want to hold on to their character.
No one wants to die. You gotta
Mm-hmm.
keep going. Yada yada yada. So I definitely enjoy things like this. Still, though, where like it's not a game over. It's a potential game over if you don't deal with it.
Don't take candy from strangers.
Yes, there should be consequences to not being careful, and I think especially 5th edition is pretty forgiving when it comes to doing stupid things that should kill you, and it's just like
maybe that's why you can revive at such a low level, because they want you to do stupid things that can kill you. You can just be like, aha.
Yeah, but see, that's the whole thing. There should be penalties for coming back from the dead, but I don't want to talk about it right now. But I liked that from a design standpoint. And then below the catacombs, there are the vaults, which this just, like, nothing down here makes sense, right? Like, how are they getting in? Where'd the dragon get in from? Like, there's no big giant cave. Okay, there's a dragon down here. But the main shtick is that there's two factions down here. There's a faction of the Minotaurs. There's a faction of Gnolls. And they're being played off each other by an ogre mage. I want to say it was Oni. So an ogre mage, effectively, that's shape-shifting to lead both of them. And, I mean...
like, how are all these things down here?
What are they eating, except for each other? And that's the thing, is like, Gnolls...
Well, we've dungeoned. Now we have to dragon.
Yes, we have to dragon. Well, we're dungeoning to get to the dragoning. But, yeah, I don't want to think about that too much. But... I don't know.
It's like, as much as it's just a room. It's a room with
it's a lot of rooms, though, right? Like, it's, I mean, the one thing that's nice about it is because there's two factions, you can negotiate with one or the other. right? You can fight.
This is sort of like a problem that we've you're, sorry, but there's like this is a problem that we've run into in a few things where there's like the sum of all the parts weaken the adventure, where there's, you know, great climaxes in other parts, and then it just drags on into this like, okay, well, now you have to clear 45 rooms to finally finish. It's like, well, you could cut this in half and make it different things, or you could have, you know, a movie that went on too long.
Yeah,
I feel
and some of this is definitely just mushed together. This is where we're starting to get into like the super dungeony aspect, and I really dislike super dungeons because of the reasons that we're talking about, because it doesn't really make sense.
Yeah.
I mean, as an individual standalone thing, being able to negotiate, play off factions against each other, that's cool.
Yeah.
Why they're here makes very little sense. And once again, because there's no history between the party and these factions, it's a little less interesting. The one thing I did like about this is that the players can unintentionally determine the outcome. Because you just show up, and if the first room you go into is full of gnolls, you kill a bunch of gnolls, and you like leave. Well, now the Minotaurs have a numerical advantage, and they just kill the rest of the gnolls. So when you come back, there's no gnolls anymore. There's just the Minotaurs. Mm-hmm. So I thought that was kind of fun. I mean, you can just go. I mean, realistically, what's going to happen is you're just going to go down there and you're just going to kill everything.
Yeah. Right?
Like, you might use one side against the other to weaken them, and then you're going to kill the other faction because they're bad. And then I think the Oni has cards, so you got to kill the Ogre Mage anyways. So, yay. And then, of course, there's a dragon, because, I mean, I at least want to say we're not intentionally choosing adventures that have dragons, but there definitely seems to be, like, maybe...
It's almost like a random chance that we're picking...
There seems to be a lot of dragons and
weird for a game called Dungeons and Dragons.
Yes, it really should just be called Dungeons. Like,
yeah.
Trying to shoehorn dragons all the time. So once again, like, here we are at reasonably low level, and especially in 4th edition, because 4th edition goes from 1st to 30th, right? So you're 8th level characters maybe at this point, and you get to fight a dragon, which is always fun. Don't get me wrong. Like, it's Dungeons and Dragons, running into a dragon and fighting dragons. You should die. And I have a very strong opinion on you should never win against a dragon.
And if there's a dragon down there, like, how has the dragon not taken complete control over both factions? Like, wouldn't they be terrified of it?
I don't know.
In its yeah. Anyway.
Or, you know, having the orcs tithe to it. Like, granted, it's not like a great old dragon, or, you know, I don't know, it's not even an adult, right? It's always something appropriate for the, you know, character level. The coolest thing about them is that there's a kobold cult that worships the dragon. So I like kobolds. I like the whole structure there. So that's just kind of an interesting, I mean, each of the pieces are interesting, they start to fall apart as a whole in this section, right? Like, there's nothing here that's not kind of cool.
Yeah, it'd be a lot better just cut a few of them, develop one of them, make it more interesting.
Yeah, I think with fewer things. I mean, there's bits and pieces that you could easily steal and use for any other type of adventure you wanted to run. But altogether, it starts to feel like too much.
Yeah, I agree.
You know, and I think sometimes people just, when you're designing adventures, you're just like, oh, well, we've already done a bunch of orcs. What should we include? Right. Oh, we need to do undead. Oh, we already did the undead, so what else can we put in here? What if I like minotaurs? Minotaurs are fun. I like when people draw.
And this is like far
right?
enough along that you shouldn't, like, it shouldn't be something where you have to throw a bunch of stuff at people to be like, this is what's in D&D.
Yeah,
they should know, but they've probably played enough at this point.
Yeah, so it's. I mean, I think it's part of the issue with longer, and this is a big adventure. Like,
Very big. Yeah,
it's 150 pages or something like that. So it's trying to be meaty, I guess, but I don't know. It was a bit problematic for me. Also, I mean, like, you gotta kill the dragon to get the cards. Right. So I have issue. Like, I've mentioned it previously, and I'll probably mention it again. But, you know, you should never be able to defeat a dragon in its lair unless things go really well for you or really bad for the dragon.
Yeah.
And then you defeat the dragon, and I personally found that the horde was kind of like, really? Like, it's a dragon. I killed the dragon, and all I got was a big pile of coppers. You know, like, it's not super exciting. Now, there's one thing down here that I did like, is there's that checkerboard fight. Like, because once again, now we're into, like, the sub-basement, and this is why there's minotaurs here, because this used to be a minotaur temple a long time ago. So they had an arena where they tested themselves.
That's right.
And then there's the checkers. So depending on which color you're standing on, it provides, like, bonuses and stuff. So there was a bit of interesting tactical arbitrary tactical stuff that got built into because you're fighting on a checkerboard. And I read that, I'm like, that's cute. It's kind of, dumb maybe. But sometimes, not to think that I poo-poo on fun all the time, but it was, I thought that was kind of,
I think that's like one of the things that
encounter.
would be okay if there was less things here.
Mm-hmm.
Like you'd have time to do that and appreciate it, as opposed to like just something you have to get out of the way to go do something else.
It's a little sort of thematically disjointing, I think, as you bounce around between all of this stuff. Because it gets wacky in places without like just committing to nonstop wacky.
Yeah.
Right. Like White Plume Mountain, I believe, is the completely wacky one. It's been a while since I've read those things. But there are some things where the whole adventure is designed to just be ridiculous.
Yeah.
You do this room and it's a crazy room, and you do this room and it's a crazy room. So I think if you're signing up for just like a ridiculous
fun, there's other adventures that are better suited to that.
Well, I mean, I think those types of adventures are great, especially if they're like one shots.
Yeah.
Like if you want to do a one shot wacky, like you're all goblins in this particular one, right? Or like your elves trying to steal cookies from Santa's kitchen, right? Like you can have wacky one shots, but
to mix it up,
when you put in too much wacky in what has mostly been a pretty serious and well put together adventure, like on the whole, I actually really like this.
Yeah.
And I'd run it. I think.
Final thoughts then.
Final thoughts. I like that there's a lot of approaches that you can take. You're not shoehorned. I mean, some places you kind of are, but you're not completely shoehorned in any given thing. You can do things in different order. Like you can interact with different NPCs and do different quests. You can run through one whole quest line and stuff like that. So there's a lot of flexibility in how you approach situations. And I like that. I liked the randomness of the adventure design. I like the picking the cards determines a lot about it. I like that it's pseudo sandbox-y. Like there's enough choice to make the players feel that they have agency and can decide on what they want to do and how they approach things. And then, of course, I like that you end up with the deck of many things potentially at the end, right?
Yeah.
Like I like adventures where they end with a pretty obvious stepping stone to something else,
right?
So we mentioned this already, but it's a huge potential plot hook. So maybe the players decide they want to destroy it. Well, how do you do that? So there's your quest thing. And alternatively, like they can be in possession of the Abbey, right?
You could get.
You could have enough money to rebuild it, and now you have a place, and then you move on. Like, there's a lot of potential moving on points. How about you, Eddie? Anything you want to add?
I agree with pretty much everything that you've said there. I'm the front end of this adventure, I feel, outweighs the back end, and that it feels like there's a lot of creativity and thought went into designing, the encounters and where the cards are, and then you break the wall down, and then it just ends up being a grind at the end. So
Well, I mean, I guess the argument could be made that you could probably just remove the vaults, right? The catacombs kind of make sense.
Yeah.
Right?
Maybe that's better, right? But I just feel like there's a ton of creativity that the authors put into this and creating this, interesting reason why all these things are here, and dynamic play and rival parties. And then, you finally get to the spot where you're supposed to be, and then there's just a bunch of stuff that you have to murder to get the last cards for the sake of just doing it.
Well, I mean, you might have to murder it unless the rival adventurers have already been there. And like you might not even have to fight the dragon, right? You just show up at the dragon, and the adventurers are like looting the horde, sawing off horns and teeth and stuff like that. So I mean, that's one way that you could lighten things out. Is you just use your rival adventurers as being more successful. And actually, that's one of the things that it might...
Maybe if they take the Fey Knight as a patron, he offers, you finish his quest and he offers to bring you to the Feywild to claim your reward, and then you come back and everything's done.
But just as a finishing note here, I mean, there are 3 designers attached to this, and I wonder if some of the things that we're complaining about is due to different design aesthetics based off of the different people, right?
Maybe
like,
you design the front, I'll design the back.
Well, you work on this, or like, okay, you're going to do a catacomb level, you're going to do a vaults level, and obviously you have a lead designer who's giving you input or whatnot, but like there's
Probably,
definitely some thematic shifts.
Too many cooks in the kitchen.
Potentially, it's just different because it's not even too many cooks in the kitchen. It's not everyone's got their own style.
Yeah.
Right. So maybe we're just losing some of the cohesion that you get when you have a smaller adventure that's the vision of a single voice.
Right.
Right.
Yep.
And it's just the differences of the voices. Maybe that's where some of my, like, because if you think about it, some of the parts are super like adventure fiesta, monster fiesta stuff, and other parts are more like unified in it. So I wonder if it's just different design decisions based off of the people that did that, right? Like, so maybe
Could be.
like theoretically, like I could see that the person who did the Fey Grove also be the person that did the Dragon Roost, because it's all just a bunch of random monsters, like which lacks the cohesion that you see, say, in the orc level or the undead level, if you will, right? So I don't know. I don't know. Maybe I'm just being nitpicky. Overall, I think Gardmore Abbey is super fun. There's lots of interesting stuff in there. Also, just reminds me that I do like 4th edition, and I think 4th edition's fun. But I think I'm talked out. Anything else you?
No, thanks for listening, guys.
Yeah, we'll catch you next time.